Hello friends, I am glad to see you again. Today I will talk about the HOA that doesn't want me on my property. When the dispatcher's voice crackled through the phone on speaker and asked me to describe the trespasser, I almost laughed. I was the trespasser, on my own pasture, standing 10 feet from the rusted windmill that's been the cover photo of my family Christmas card since flip phones were new. The wind was pushing the smell of cut hay across the fence line, and the heifers behind me were chewing like teenage boys at a buffet, oblivious as always. I held the orange post-hole digger in my hand like a prop in a play, as a line of neatly dressed people on the other side of the fence, nearly all in matching polo shirts, glared at me like I'd broken into their living rooms. The woman at the front had a clipboard and the kind of confidence that usually travels with a laminated badge. "You're trespassing on common land," she announced, as if her voice alone could relocate property lines that were set when this county had more dirt roads than paved ones. She spoke to me, but she was also performing for the audience of 3 men beside her and 2 teens with a phone recording everything. One of the men had his phone to his ear, already giving the operational rundown to 911 like he was narrating a nature documentary about a rare criminal and its habitat. "I'm on my side," I said, forcing my jaw to unclench. "That fence was put in before your development even existed. My grandfather's initials are carved into that corner post. We have the map," the clipboard woman said, shaking a printed color page that looked like it came from a welcome packet. "This greenbelt extends 15 feet beyond this fence. It's a walking path. Pets on leashes only." "I don't have a leash big enough for a 200-pound heifer, Kendra," I said. I only knew her name because it was on the Facebook group that exploded last month when someone posted a cell phone video of a cow sniffing a stroller through this very fence, and half the comments called it an attack. Someone wrote, "Where is the HOA?" in all caps. I'm not an HOA member. My land was never part of the development, and I have the deed from the courthouse and a crisp survey to prove it. But that video had apparently installed a sense of jurisdiction in the people who bought houses bordering my property line. And today, they arrived like a field trip. "It's president," she corrected and then pointed to my auger. "And you cannot put up a fence without approval." "I'm repairing a fence," I said, "and you don't approve anything on this side of the wire." The man on the phone stepped forward. Yes, he's middle-aged, ball cap, gray shirt, holding some kind of tool. "He's refusing to leave the HOA path," he told the dispatcher. Then to me, "You can explain it to a deputy, they'll settle it." "Happy to," I said, though my stomach was doing a tight little roll. Cops make me nervous even when I'm right. My father taught me to treat a badge like a bull. Respect it. Make slow movements. Keep your voice calm and keep a gate between you and it if you can. I set the auger down, pulled out my phone and hit record, angling it so the survey stake in the ground showed up in the bottom of the frame. It had a neon ribbon tied to it. Merritt, the surveyor I hired in spring, had driven it down 18 inches to hit the original metal pin, the one you find with a locator wand and a little patience. I panned over to the fence post, then to the group on the other side. "You're being combative," the tall guy in khakis said. "I'm being documented," I replied. "There's a difference." It took about 10 minutes for the deputy to roll up, long enough for a couple of toddlers on scooters to appear at the end of the cul-de-sac, and an older gentleman in a straw hat to drift over like this was free entertainment. The deputy was young and had that careful, practiced tone I recognize from someone who has to be ready for anything. "Hi, folks," she said, her hand not touching her holster, just resting near it like a person sets a coffee mug in reach. "We got a call about a trespass." The tall guy lifted his chin in my direction. Clipboard Kendra stepped half in front of him. "Officer, thank goodness. He won't leave our path. It's right there on the map." She thrust papers forward like they were sacred text. "I'm on my side," I said, holding up the survey's stamped page like a kid with a hall pass. "You can pull parcel data. This fence is on my property line. I'm repairing a broken stay. My cows got out last week because someone cut this wire and folded it back, likely kids playing. I'm fixing it." The deputy kept her voice calm. "I'm going to check the county parcel map and see what it says. May I see your ID, sir?" I gave it, and she radioed dispatch to confirm parcel numbers. I could hear the relay. The address from the cul-de-sac, the parcel across the fence line, the number assigned to my 83 acres that, my grandmother always said, had been square since before squares were a fashion. While she waited, she read the survey, her finger tracing the box that shows the bearings and the line distances. "Dispatch confirms the fence aligns with the parcel boundary," she said after a minute, handing back my ID. "This side is his land. "He can't build without our approval," Clipboard said, the words brittle. "He's not building on your parcels," the deputy replied, "and your HOA can't enforce rules on property that isn't within your association. It's a greenbelt," the khaki guy said, as if the word had magical powers. The deputy kept her voice neutral. "Greenbelts end at boundaries, like everything else." There was a pause in which I could feel the HOA machinery spinning and clicking, processing the idea that their rulebook had borders. I've always said fences exist for two kinds of people: the ones you need to keep in and the ones who need you to keep out. Most folks get which side they're on, some don't. Clipboard. Kendra's face flattened into a look I'd seen on both disapproving teachers and toddlers denied candy. "We're calling our attorney," she announced. "And don't you dare touch our walking path." "I don't dare touch anything on your side," I said, then gestured to the ribboned stake. "But that line? That's mine." The deputy looked at me. "You said the fence was cut?" "Last Thursday," I said, showing her the photo I took of the slack wire and the boot prints on my side. "I patched it with a temporary fastener, and now I'm putting a proper stay back in. If you see anyone messing with your fence, call us," she said. Then she turned to the HOA group. "Also, false reports to 911 can result in citation. Please make sure you're certain before you call." She said it gently, the way you tell a dog not to chew the shoe it's already chewed. Then she left. The crowd thinned with muttered disapproval. Listening to them walk away, I heard the words barn smell, property values, and rooster, as if those were crimes in themselves. Clipboard Kendra lingered with her two vice somethings. "We'll be back," she said, like a promise or a threat, I couldn't tell which. Then they walked off, their coordinated shirts retreating like a flock. I sank the post-hole digger into the crumbly dirt and thought about how many springs I've had this exact soil under my nails. My grandmother Ora used to say, "Some people inherit jewelry. You inherited chores." She was right in the best way. I fixed that stay, then walked the fence for a while like I always do after a conflict, checking for damage, finding calm in the rhythm of looking. My heifers followed along, curious. A red-tailed hawk circled and screamed above me like a tiny dinosaur. Inside the far tree line, I could hear the small, persistent trickle of the irrigation pipeline the developer installed a decade ago, long before buyers arrived. They had permission from my dad to run it along the property line. A handshake agreement, no easement recorded. Just neighborly cooperation. My dad thought it was the right thing to do when the bulldozers showed up and asked to feed their ornamental lawns with water that happens to cross the corner of our back field. By the time I got back to the windmill, my phone pinged with an email notification from an address that looked official in the way a business card looks important when it's on thick paper. It was a notice of architectural violation. Architectural. Against a barbed wire fence that has been here since my great-grandfather ran sheep. I laughed out loud in the field, a sound that made one of the heifers look at me like I'd learned a new language. I went inside, wiped my boots, made coffee, and sat at the kitchen table with Aura's old ledger of property records open beside my laptop. The ledger's pages smell like dust and hay, and a hint of the kitchen wood stove we removed after it cracked. Dad's notes are in 3 different pens. There's a yellowed newspaper clipping about an auction from the 1960s tucked into the back, and inside the front cover are the words he wrote when the subdivision was approved. "Record everything, write down every handshake." I scanned the HOA email. It ordered me to cease unauthorized construction, submit plans for my fence repair to their architectural review committee, and pay a provisional fine of $200 for working without approval. It referenced a section of a document I was never party to. It said further non-compliance would result in additional fines and possible legal action. I took a breath, thought about the deputy's warning, and then started to draft a response with words I knew mattered in this country. I am not a member. I am not bound by your declarations. Your authority ends at your boundary. If you contact me again with demands, I will consider it harassment. I attached a PDF of the recorded plat and the survey with Merritt's stamp on it. And I CC'd myself on my secondary email because Dad taught me paper trails are like fence lines. You lay them straight, you check them often. The reply came back in under an hour, which told me they were on fire and had probably set up a group text about me. The subject line glowed. Urgent. Trespass continues. The body said they'd spoken to their counsel. Property lines were a matter of dispute, and they'd secure the greenbelt to prevent my access. The last line was, We will gate the path at the cul-de-sac this afternoon. I sipped my coffee and blinked. Gating the cul-de-sac would cut off the gravel easement I've used since I was 12 to bring tractors around during hay season. That small access point is recorded on the plat as a non-exclusive agricultural ingress-egress, a compromise the developer made when the county first looked at his plan. They can't just gate a recorded access because their committee felt away. I texted Merritt, "Call me." He answered on the second ring, "Either you found gold or you found trouble." "Trouble," I said and explained. He whistled softly. "You want the stamp on paper or the stamp in court?" "Start with paper," I said. "If they gate the cul-de-sac this afternoon, I'm going to need you sooner." It was almost noon when I heard the metallic clatter that sounds like a trailer ramp dropping. I drove my side-by-side down to the access point. Two men had backed a flatbed to the mouth of the gravel lane and were wrestling a prefabricated black metal swing gate toward the post holes they'd clearly dug that morning. The gate had spears on top like a tiny castle fence, and one of the guys had a shirt that said, "Neighborhood Appearance Team." The other nodded at me like a neighbor who'd rather not be involved. "Afternoon," I said. "Private work area," he replied, not looking at me. "This is recorded access," I said, pointing at the White County tag hammered into the corner post. "No gate, no lock. It's written in the plat," he shrugged. "I do what I'm told. If you got a problem, talk to the board." "I talked to a deputy," I said. "You want to risk a criminal interference charge?" He hesitated. The way a guy does when he's calculating whether the one giving him a check today will still be that guy tomorrow. He looked at the neighborhood appearance team guy, who looked back toward the cul-de-sac. Clipboard Kendra stood with her arms crossed a few yards away, wearing sunglasses like a visor. "Keep going," she said. "We have counsel." I pulled out my phone and called the sheriff's office. "It's Brandt," I said to the dispatcher, who knew me from the time I found a lost horse and walked it down the county road to safety. "They're blocking my recorded easement." The deputy who arrived was older, with the kind of eyes that say he's seen all of this twice. He read the county tag, took photos of the gate components, and asked to see the HOA's paperwork. Clipboard Kendra produced the same glossy map. He looked at it and then at me and said, "I'm going to call the county planning office." As he did that, the HOA lawyer must have called her because her phone lit up and she stepped aside to take it. I couldn't hear the words, but I could hear the deflating tone that happens when someone realizes the piece of paper in their hand doesn't have the kind of authority they thought it did. The deputy returned. "County says that little strip is indeed recorded access. It's not an HOA-controlled improvement. If you obstruct it, you can be cited," he said to the workers. Then to me, "If they continue, call us again." The workers put the gate back on the trailer with the resignation of men whose jobs require them to pack up pride as often as gear. Clipboard Kendra didn't meet my eyes. As they left, I watched a dozen faces in nearby windows blink closed like shutters. That evening, I fed the heifers and sat on the tailgate of my old pickup, watching the light change the color of the grass from green to gold. I thought about my dad's handwriting in the ledger and the line he'd underlined when the developer first paved that cul-de-sac. "Neighbors make peace by remembering the fence helps them both." I'm not a man who hunts for fights, but I've learned that certain people only hear boundaries when a gavel pronounces them. Before I went inside, I walked down to the old pump house, the one my grandfather added to feed a line that runs along the property edge to the west. Years ago, when the developer showed up with trucks and the county inspector, they asked if they could tap into the run to supply a booster pump for their sprinkler system. Dad, who tried to get along with everyone, wrote them a letter giving permission, so long as it causes no harm, the kind of neighborly license that was meant to save headaches in July, not create them in September. There was never a formal easement, just the letter, a handshake, and a sense that people would respect the source they relied on. I listened to the faint hum through the pump house wall and thought about revocability, about how rights that aren't written can be taken back. I closed the pump house door and clicked the padlock. A padlock they'd asked for and we'd supplied because people worried about kids messing with valves. I looked at the lock and thought for the first time of it as leverage. The next week taught me two things at once. First, there's nothing like a homeowner's board with hurt feelings to generate paperwork. Second, I am very glad I hoard documentation like my grandmother hoarded canning jars. On Tuesday, I got a certified letter leaning against my mailbox like a scold. Cease and desist. Unauthorized activity adjacent to common land. On Wednesday, a different letter arrived complaining about animal odors detected at property boundary at or around 0600 HRS. as if my farm was a misbehaving teenager breaking curfew. On Thursday, there was a printed photo of my rooster, Spindle, with a timestamp like he was a person of interest. I am not a monster. I like people. I wave. I plow the road when heavy snow falls because I have a tractor and I can, but I also don't like being bullied. My default move when pushed is to plant my boots deeper and call a person who knows how deep the line goes. "Merritt," I said over the phone, "how quickly can you lay out a boundary with enough flags that even someone who never got grass stains as a child can't miss it?" He arrived Saturday with a tripod, a device that costs more than my truck, and a cooler full of ginger ale. Merritt looks like he should teach calculus at a high school that still keeps robots in a closet, but he spends most days tromping in the mud and laughing at dogs named for snacks. It took him half a day to walk the line from the north corner by the cottonwood trees to the last fence post by the cul-de-sac. He tied neon flags every 20 feet. He hammered fluorescent-painted lath into the ground at each corner. He set 2 temporary monuments with an actual stamp. Then he called me over and nodded toward the far west strip. "See that?" he said, crouching to show me where the irrigation line crosses. "The pump house is 6 feet inside your boundary. It's on your land. That booster sits on your dirt." I was thinking the same thing, I said. "Dad never recorded an easement." "Even if he had, you can enforce terms," Merritt said. "But there's no record. That's a bare license. You can revoke. Authorizing a use and tolerating a use are different things. A license is like letting a neighbor cut through your yard because it's a shorter path to the bus stop. Polite. Good for community. But when that neighbor starts telling you not to plant flowers because it blocks their view of the mailbox, you revoke the shortcut and put up a sign. "Put those words in an email," I said. He did, along with the attachments my dad would have clipped to a folder and labeled with a piece of masking tape. The old letter, scanned from our ledger, the county plat sheet, and Merritt's fresh survey stamps. He included a gentle line about how any tampering with survey markers is a misdemeanor under state code. A statement general enough to be true in most places without pinning us to a spot on a map. He's careful. We sent the packet certified to the HOA's listed mailbox and sent a digital copy to their info@ address that had been busy. 2 days later, a reply arrived from board secretary, created in the tone of a committee trained on the rhetorical idea that if you say a word like demand often enough, it becomes a spell. The email declared that our markers were inaccurate, that we'd moved a fence to steal land, and said that they'd seek law enforcement assistance if we entered the Greenbelt. It was signed dramatically, on behalf of the community. That afternoon, I found 3 of the neon flags pulled up and tossed into my pasture like wounded birds. My stomach dropped the way it does when you see brake lights in fog. I took pictures, reset the lath, and added trail cameras on my side of the fence pointed at each crossing where feet had scuffed soil. I have no interest in playing sheriff on my own land. But I also know that a grainy video of someone with a distinctive walk being naughty can be the difference between he said, she said, and we watched you. Please stop. Merritt texted me after dark. Sorry you have toddlers in grown-up bodies next door. I thanked him and went to bed listening to the owl that hunts the far field, grateful for creatures who do their jobs without committee minutes. On Thursday, it escalated. I was working the low swale by the creek, clearing silt to keep spring runoff from carving new paths, when a little quadcopter came over the cottonwoods and hung above me like an anxious hummingbird. It buzzed with that high whine that makes dogs bark and people look up just so the operator knows they got your attention. The quadcopter drifted toward the pump house, hovered to look down at the lock like it was casing a bank, and then zipped along my fence line, filming the new flags like trophies. I pulled my phone, took my own video of the hovering toy, and yelled above the whine, "Stay out of my airspace over my land." I know drones occupy legal gray areas, but I also know that you're not allowed to pester livestock or people. The little machine tilted a bit, an odd, expressive robot shrug, and then slid sideways back toward the cul-de-sac until I couldn't see it for the cottonwoods. I sent the video to Merritt and to Deputy Lawson, the young woman from the first day, who'd given me her card with "Feel free to call if things get weird" in ballpoint on the back. I called the county animal control officer who knows my rooster's name and said, "Hey, if a drone spooks my cows and they break fence, who pays for the damage?" He didn't hesitate. "The operator," he said. "If you've got video and we can trace who it is, we'll help write that up." I'm not a fan of tit for tat. You spend enough years with animals, you realize life's already full of small retaliations. The rooster that pecks when you move a feeder, The heifer that swings her head at you if you take her too long to water. The only moves I like are the ones that settle things, like when you fix a sagging gate and the whole line hangs straight again. But there are also moments you have to set a stake and build out from it. The drone was a stake moment. I wrote a letter to the board and another to their property management company. They'd CC'd a property manager on one of their earlier notes and included stills from the drone showing my yard, my kid's trampoline, my wife's tomato trellis. I cited the state's law against harassment and interference with agricultural operations. I asked them to instruct their residents to keep drones off my property and to stop peering into my windows. I added that any further flights would result in a complaint. Late that night, I got a reply not from the board, but from an email address that looked personal. Mason. The tone was slightly less performative. "Hey," it said without salutation. "We just want to make sure you're not going to hurt anyone or block the path. There's a lot of concern. Can we meet?" I have complicated feelings about meeting people who open with a threat and then pivot to coffee when they run into a badge. But I also believe in giving people chances to course correct. We agreed to meet Saturday morning at the fence line by the windmill. I set the time early because people who are serious show up before brunch. I got there first with a thermos. Mason came second, hands in the pockets of his hoodie, wearing loafers, which told me he hadn't been outside a lot lately. Clipboard Kendra showed up next. She had a different clipboard this time, thicker, which I figured was either more documents or a prop to make the same point louder. Two other board folks came, one of them the tall khaki guy with the drone swagger even without a drone. "Thanks for meeting," I said, opening with goodwill. "I want to live in peace. That looks like boundaries being respected." "We agree," Mason said quickly, glancing at Kendra. "But we're worried about the kids on the path." "This is a working farm," I said. "I will keep the fence up. The fence will keep the kids out, and we'll be fine. I don't want calves in your cul-de-sac. You don't want kids in my heifer lot." Clipboard tilted her head. "There have been odors," she said, like she'd practiced saying the word without emotion, but then a little emotion leaked out. "And noise. The rooster. You bought a house next to a farm," I said. "I built the coop away from your bedrooms and keep the manure piled where flies are controlled. If you ever smell something bad and it's my fault, call me and I'll fix it. But my animals aren't a violation of your standards." "You're aggressive," Khaki muttered. "I'm assertive," I said. "The difference is I have the deeds." We stood there in an awkward triangle until Mason tried a different tack. "We saw there's a pump house," he said, glancing toward the little shed. "Our council says it's a shared resource. We pay to maintain it." "You may have paid for landscaping inside your association," I said. "But that pump sits on my dirt and pushes my water. My father allowed that connection on the condition it caused no trouble. It's causing trouble." "So you're threatening to shut off the water to hundreds of sprinklers?" Clipboard said, her eyebrows lifting like a gate. "I'm stating a boundary," I said. "If the harassment stops, no more drones, no more pulled flags, no more letters, you can keep your water like you have for years. If not, I revoke my permission and will get a court order to ratify it." Mason looked worried. Clipboard looked offended that I had leverage. Khaki looked like he wanted to argue about the nature of leverage and whether the concept existed when he didn't like it. "We'll be in touch," Mason said, which was both a cliche and a promise. They walked away, and I stood there finishing my coffee and watching the heifers chew, which is the best therapy you can get without insurance. For a week it was quiet. No drones, no letters. The flags fluttered in the wind like little reminders that law is sometimes as simple as a line in the dirt. I worked the pasture and fixed a broken slat on the east side of the old barn. My wife, Jessa, made her famous biscuits and sent a plate to the older couple at the end of the road that has always been kind. I helped a Boy Scout troop from the next neighborhood learn how to set a post, and they took pictures with the windmill like it was a monument. And then Thursday hit like a pot dropped in a quiet kitchen. I was in the swale again, this time with the small tractor, dragging the blade to shape the ditch so spring would run where it should and not where it wanted. Two HOA board members appeared at the fence, Clipboard and Khaki, with their phones out, recording. 5 minutes later, a patrol car rolled in from the county road, lights off but presence unmistakable. Same young deputy as before and another I hadn't met. "Sir," she said, "we got a report that you're bulldozing a trail." "I'm grading my ditch," I said, and gestured at the blade, at the heifers, at the dirt that was my dirt. "This is a tractor, not a bulldozer." "We have photos," Clipboard said, as if photographs can transform soil. "I have deeds," I replied, and I held up my phone with the survey ready like a magician with one trick he's perfected, and a camera on the dash that shows me staying entirely inside my line. "Let's see it." the older deputy said. I pulled the SD card, popped it into my phone, and played back 5 minutes of me moving at a speed you could beat with a brisk stroller, keeping my blade inside the lath like I was painting within the lines because I was. He watched, nodded, and told them, "Nothing illegal here." Khaki, suddenly sporting a limp I hadn't noticed earlier, rubbed his shin with theatrical winces. "He nearly hit me with that thing," he said. "I was nowhere near you," I said, and pulled up another camera angle. I'd added a rear-mounted camera after I heard about a neighbor in another county who got accused of reversing into someone. On my screen, the tractor moved. Khaki was safely behind the fence at all times, at least 8 feet from the blade. He'd stepped toward the fence at one point as if to get closer for his video, but no more. He had not been in danger. The older deputy's expression did something that looked like patience tied with a thin string. "Y'all need to remember a fence isn't a suggestion," he said gently to them. Then to me, "I'm going to write an incident report, but there's no crime here. If they keep calling, we might need to have a longer talk about misuse of the emergency line." He left with the younger deputy, and for a moment there was silence except for the wind and the sound of a cow scratching herself against a post, which is the cheerful music of summer. Then Clipboard said, "You can't threaten our water." "I didn't threaten," I said. "I explained. You've been good for a week. I appreciate it. But if this keeps up, consider the tap closed." "Try it," Khaki said with the courage of someone who believed bureaucracy was a shield. "Be careful what you ask for," I replied, and climbed back on my tractor to finish the grade I started because I have a schedule, and I don't like leaving a job half done unless there's lightning. That night I wrote the letter Dad would have written. "To whom it may concern," it began, which is how he always started anything that might see a courtroom later. "Effective 30 days from the date of this letter, permission granted for the use of the pump situated on my property to supply irrigation to the adjacent development is revoked." I listed the reasons: harassment, interference with agricultural operations, trespass by drone, attempted obstruction of a recorded easement, repeated false reports to law enforcement. I didn't embellish. I didn't threaten. I just laid out facts like fence planks. I printed it on the old letterhead with the windmill at the top, signed it, made 3 copies, and sent them certified to the HOA, the property manager, and the developer, who still had a mailing address on record, even though he'd long since moved on from this particular set of roofs. 2 days later, a hard knock hit my door, the clipboard kind. A woman in a blazer handed me a letter. "I represent the association," she said. "Cease any action regarding the pump until we meet." I gave 30 days notice, I said. "Meet within that window." "On what authority can you shut off a community resource?" "Ownership. If you'd recorded an easement, we'd discuss its terms. You didn't. Permission isn't forever." "We can get a court order," she said. "Please do, and tell your board to stop calling 911 when I move dirt on my side." Their letter set an all-parties meeting in 10 days. I stacked my proof: survey, letters, videos, photos of pulled flags, the plat showing agricultural access, and Dad's ledger note: "No easement, no privilege, just courtesy." On day 19, a drone buzzed my fence, hovering over the pump house lock. Trail cams caught it. That afternoon, the padlock had fresh scratches. The deputy photographed everything and wrote, "Attempted tampering with a secured enclosure. Could it be a crime? If we tie it to a person," she said. The meeting took place in a strip mall conference room. HOA brought council and board members. I brought Merritt and the survey. Their attorney said community a dozen times and accused me of jeopardizing tranquility. Merritt pointed to the line. "The pump sits on my client's land. No recorded easement. At best, a revocable license, now revoked. He'll license again if respected. Compensation, insurance, no harassment clause." "We can't pay him to bully us," Clipboard snapped. Council shushed her. "We can consider a license, but we want revocation delayed until the membership votes." I gave 30 days, I said. "If you want a deal, make one." They asked for 2 weeks. I allowed one if mischief stopped. That afternoon, someone spray-painted "Farm Stinks" on the pump house. I sent photos. The sheriff dusted for prints. On day 38, still no deal. I shut the valve, disconnected the booster, capped the line, and posted, "License revoked, call to discuss." Entrance sprinklers died by sundown. 2 days later, the ferns drooped. By day 5, the beds looked tragic. The property manager emailed, "Urgent, restore water. Willing to discuss compensation." I proposed a county rate stipend, maintenance cost sharing, and a clause that any harassment ends the license without further grace. Meanwhile, a produce stand neighbor forwarded an HOA blast. Don't buy his eggs. We're pursuing charges. That lie dented sales. My lawyer sent a letter. Retract to the same list. Cease defamation and tortious interference. Remember, 911 tapes are public. They retracted in 48 hours. No charges are pending. The fingerprints matched a beautification volunteer. He admitted it and was cited. Water talks finally moved. The property manager drafted a license recognizing my control of the pump with a monthly stipend, maintenance duties, indemnification, and a no harassment termination clause. Merritt tweaked it. My lawyer added teeth. We signed. Sprinklers clattered back on. A week of peace followed. Then a flyer announced a special assessment to restore entrance landscaping, blaming external factors beyond our control. I sent a packet to the 911 oversight board. Call logs, videos, letters. 2 weeks later, habitual false callers were warned they'd be fined personally for future misuse. Silence bloomed. One more spillover. Their pedestrian path crept 3 feet into my corner. Fresh chalk marks suggested widening. On my dirt, I taped a notice to their bollard. A contractor arrived. I flagged the survey stake. They said it's a dispute, he shrugged. It's not, I said. He loaded up and left. Rain erased the chalk. That's how it went. Drones, rumors, bad letters, answered with deeds, flags, and patience. They learned the simplest truth, the one you can write in ink or carve into a post. This is mine, and that is not. Forget it, and the water shuts off, the calls cost money, and the hedge keeps growing between us. Green, quiet, undeniably real. For the record, folks. Friends, thank you. See you soon.